It was late November, and the Ohio sky looked like an old bruise, swollen with gray clouds that promised snow. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel of my Ford F-150 as I rolled down Highway 71, the same road I had driven 1,000 times during my years at the plant. Retirement gave me too much time to think, too much time to miss my wife Helen, who'd passed away just 9 months earlier. Thanksgiving had always been her holiday. She was the glue, the warmth, the laughter that made the turkey taste better and the silence bearable. Without her, the house had become a shell echoing with loneliness. That's why I told myself I was going to my daughter's place in suburban Dayton, uninvited but hopeful. Family sticks together, Helen's voice often whispered in my head, and I wanted to believe she was still guiding me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments. My daughter Claire had remarried 3 years ago after her first husband passed away. The man she chose, Victor Simmons, was the kind of fellow who shook your hand too hard and smiled without his eyes. From the first moment, I had smelled something rotten beneath his polished surface. But Claire insisted he was good for her, good for the family, and I tried, God knows I tried to keep my mouth shut. Claire's son from her first marriage, Ethan, was my grandson. 17 now, tall and quiet, with a stubborn streak of decency I recognized from his father. He and Victor never fit together, like sandpaper against silk. I'd seen the bruises once, faint yellow marks Ethan had dismissed as basketball accidents. I wanted to believe him, but something in my gut told me the truth. That Thanksgiving afternoon, snowflakes drifted across my windshield as I pulled into their neighborhood. A row of tidy brick houses lined with trimmed hedges and American flags drooping in the cold. Claire's house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, decorated with pumpkins and garlands. From the driveway, I could see light glowing warmly inside, silhouettes gathered around the dining table. But what made my blood freeze was the boy sitting on the front steps. Ethan. No coat, no gloves, just a threadbare hoodie and jeans dusted with snow. His arms were wrapped around his knees, his head bowed, shoulders trembling with more than cold. I slammed the truck door and hurried toward him, my boots crunching on the icy pavement. "Ethan!" My voice cracked with a mix of shock and fury. He looked up, his lips blue, his eyes glassy. "Grandpa!" His teeth chattered so hard I barely heard the word. "What the hell are you doing out here?" I stripped off my heavy parka and threw it around him, pulling him to his feet. He swayed, his legs buckling like wet reeds. Not allowed in." The words hit me harder than the wind. "Not allowed? What are you talking about?" His gaze flicked nervously to the front door, behind which laughter and the sound of clinking silverware floated out. "Victor said I'd ruined dinner. He told me to sit outside until I learned responsibility." I clenched my fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. My wife's voice whispered again in my head, "Family sticks together." 4 hours in the freezing cold while his mother and that monster enjoyed a feast inside? I guided him toward my truck, already making a vow in my chest. This wouldn't end with a quiet word. This wouldn't end with patience. This would end with fire. I got Ethan into the passenger seat of my truck and cranked the heater until warm air blasted through the vents. His fingers were so stiff he couldn't unlace his sneakers. I rubbed his hands between mine, the way I used to do when he was little and we went fishing at Lake Erie. Back then, he'd giggled and pretended to blow smoke like a dragon in the cold air. Now, there was no laughter, only silence, broken by his ragged breaths. "How long have you been out there, son?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. He looked down at his lap. "Since around 11. I checked my watch. 3:30. 4.5 hours. My chest burned like a furnace. "And your mother?" I forced my voice calm. "She tried." His shoulders slumped. "Victor told her to stay out of it, said it was between him and me." The shame in his voice was unbearable. Shame that he had been punished. Shame that his own mother hadn't defended him. I reached out and lifted his chin so he had to look at me. Listen to me, Ethan. What happened today, that's not discipline. That's abuse. Do you understand? He shook his head quickly. Grandpa, don't make it worse. If you go in there, he'll— What? My voice sharpened. Lock you out again? Beat you? Starve you? Son, it doesn't get worse than freezing to death on Thanksgiving Day. He looked at the front door, his eyes full of dread, but I had already made up my mind. I stepped out of the truck, my boots crunching hard on the icy driveway. Snowflakes stung my face like sparks as I marched toward the house. Ethan scrambled behind me, still wrapped in my coat, whispering for me to stop. The door was locked, but I didn't bother knocking. My heel struck beside the lock with the force of every ounce of anger in me. 68 years old, but decades of factory work had left my legs like pistons. The wood splintered, the door flung open, and silence fell inside the house like a curtain. I stepped into warmth that reeked of hypocrisy. The dining table looked like a magazine spread. White linen cloth, polished silverware, a golden turkey steaming on the platter. Candles flickered in crystal holders. Victor sat at the head of the table in a starched shirt, carving knife poised like a king on his throne. Claire, in a new red dress, sat beside him, her smile frozen in horror as I barged in. A younger girl, Victor's daughter from his first marriage, held a forkful of mashed potatoes mid-air, her wide eyes fixed on me. For a moment, nobody moved. They looked like mannequins in a department store window, perfectly arranged, perfectly fake. Then I spoke, my voice booming with a fury that made even the candles tremble. "Have you all lost your damn minds?" Claire dropped her spoon with a clatter. "Dad?" Her face drained white. What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I stepped aside so they could see Ethan, blue-lipped and shivering, still wrapped in my coat. "While you sat here feasting like royalty, this boy, your son, was freezing outside for 4 hours." Victor set down the carving knife slowly, his movements deliberate. He stood, towering over the table. He was a big man, heavy in the shoulders, but I had faced bigger bullies in my life. "Who gave you permission to enter my home?" His voice was smooth, controlled, but I heard the venom beneath it. "Permission?" I stepped forward, fists clenched. "This isn't about property lines. This is about my grandson you nearly killed." Victor smirked, crossing his arms. "He ruined Thanksgiving dinner, burned the turkey, embarrassed this family. Actions have consequences." "Consequences?" My voice thundered. "You call hypothermia a consequence? You think nearly freezing a 17-year-old is parenting?" "He's not a child," Victor snapped. "He's nearly an adult, and adults need to learn discipline." Behind him, Claire finally found her voice. "Victor, please." "Quiet," he barked, and the way she flinched told me all I needed to know. This wasn't the first time she'd swallowed her words. I pointed at Ethan, who clung to my arm like a drowning man. "Look at him, Victor. Look at his face. Look at what you've done." Victor smirked, deepened. "He'll survive. A little cold never killed anyone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." The girl at the table whimpered, dropping her fork. I stepped so close to Victor I could smell the wine on his breath. "You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson," I said, my voice low and deadly. "Or I swear I'll make sure the police know exactly what you've been doing in this house." Victor laughed, cold and sharp. "Apologize? To him? Never. If he doesn't like my rules, he can leave." My blood boiled, my heart pounding with the memory of Helen's words. Family sticks together. "You're damn right he's leaving," I said, "with me." And in that instant, the war began. Victor's jaw tightened, His chest puffed like a rooster trying to claim the barnyard. "You're not taking him anywhere," he said, stepping between Ethan and me. "This is my house, and under my roof, my rules apply." "Your roof?" I shouted back. "Then let me ask you this. Do your rules include locking children outside until they turn blue? Do your rules include bruises?" Ethan shrank behind me, and for the first time, Victor's smug mask cracked. Only slightly, but I saw it. "Dad, please." Claire's voice trembled. "Don't make this worse." "Worse?" I barked. "The boy nearly froze to death while you sat here sipping wine. You think I'm the one making it worse?" Victor's eyes flashed, his voice rising with the authority of a man who had always gotten his way. "This is a private family matter, old man. You're trespassing. Get out of my house before I throw you out." I took a deliberate step closer, close enough that my breath mingled with his. "Try it." The silence in the room was so heavy it bent the air. The girl sniffled. Claire covered her face with her hands. Ethan trembled behind me, gripping the back of my jacket. Then I did what had been building inside me since I first saw my grandson freezing on those steps. "Ethan," I said, without breaking eye contact with Victor, "go pack your things. You're coming with me." For a heartbeat, Ethan hesitated. Years of fear and conditioning held him in place. Then he looked up at me, really looked, and something shifted. He nodded and bolted for the stairs. Victor lunged, but I stepped into his path, planting my boots wide like I used to on the factory floor. "Move," he snarled. Not a chance. The next few minutes stretched like hours. Victor's breathing grew louder, heavier, while upstairs, drawers opened and closed as Ethan stuffed what little he owned into a bag. Claire wrung her hands. "Dad, you can't just take him." "Watch me." Ethan thundered back down the stairs, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes, there was fire there, a spark I hadn't seen in years. Victor's face turned purple. "You leave this house, boy, and don't you ever come back." "Fine by me," Ethan muttered, his voice steadier than I expected. The front door still sagged on its broken hinges. Cold air swirled into the dining room, extinguishing one of the candles. Without another word, I put my hand on Ethan's shoulder and guided him out into the snow. We were halfway to the truck when Claire's voice cracked behind us. "Ethan, please, don't do this." He stopped, turned, just enough to look at her. "If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have let it happen." Her face crumpled like wet paper. We climbed into the truck. I started the engine, the heater blasting once more. As I backed out of the driveway, Victor appeared in the doorway, his silhouette black against the golden light. He shouted something, maybe threats, maybe curses, but the roar of the engine drowned him out. For the first time all day, Ethan exhaled. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but in his eyes, I saw relief. Fragile, uncertain relief. "Thank you, Grandpa," he whispered. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now, son. I should have come sooner." The snow thickened as we drove north, headlights slicing through the dark. I wanted to believe it was over, that I'd rescued him, that justice would sort itself out. But deep down, I knew Victor Simmons wasn't the kind of man to lick his wounds quietly. He'd come after us. The knock on my door wasn't polite. It rattled the frame like someone expected me to obey. I had just set 2 mugs of cocoa on the coffee table. Ethan curled up on the couch in one of Helen's old quilts. The boy had color back in his cheeks. For the first time in months, maybe years, he looked almost at peace. Then came the knock again, harder, followed by a voice that made my stomach knot. "Police, open up!" Ethan froze. His mug nearly slipped from his hands. "Grandpa, he called them."
I walked to the door, shoulders squared, my gut churning with both fear and fury. Through the peephole, 2 officers stood on the porch, hats dusted with snow. And behind them, like a shadow that refused to die, stood Victor, face red, lips twisted in triumph. Claire lingered behind him, her eyes glued to the ground. I opened the door just enough to face them, keeping my body angled to block their view of Ethan. "Evening, officers. What seems to be the problem?" The taller one, his badge reading L.M. Harris, cleared his throat. "Sir, we've had a report of kidnapping. A young man named Ethan Carter is alleged to have been taken from his residence without permission." Victor surged forward, pointing a finger at me. "That's him. He broke into my house, assaulted me, and dragged the boy away like some lunatic." Dragged? I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "Officer, my grandson was locked outside in freezing weather for over 4 hours. I didn't drag him anywhere. I saved him." "Lies," Victor bellowed. "He's poisoning the boy against me." The second officer, a younger man with weary eyes, glanced past me. "Sir, is Ethan here?" Before I could stop him, Ethan stepped forward, quilts still wrapped around him. His voice trembled, but he spoke clearly. "I'm here, and I'm staying with my grandfather. He didn't kidnap me. He saved me." The air shifted. Victor's face twitched, a storm building under his skin. "Kid, you don't know what you're saying," Victor barked. "You're confused. He's manipulating you." But Ethan's voice grew stronger. "No, you are." The younger officer scratched notes, eyes narrowing. "Sir," he said to Victor, "is it true you left the boy outside as punishment?" Victor sputtered. "He ruined Thanksgiving dinner. He needed to learn responsibility." "In 5-degree weather?" My voice shook with controlled rage. "For 4.5 hours?" For the first time, the taller officer's expression hardened, not at me, but at Victor. He turned to Claire. "Ma'am, is that true?" Claire's lips quivered. She looked at Ethan, at me, then at Victor looming beside her. She hesitated. Too long. I don't know. I was in the kitchen." "Liar," Ethan whispered. Victor grabbed her wrist hard enough that she flinched. The officers noticed. Both stepped forward. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't ending tonight. This was only the beginning. The porch light hummed above us, casting yellow halos on the falling snow. The 2 officers stood shoulder to shoulder, caught between 2 narratives. Victor's performance of authority and my raw fury. L. Harris spoke first, voice steady but colder than the night air. "Mr. Simmons, step back. We need to hear everyone's version before we make any decisions." Victor's face purpled. "Decisions? The decision is simple. Arrest this old man for kidnapping, breaking, entering, and trespassing." The younger officer, his name tag read Patel, raised a hand. "Sir, calm down. You admitted you left your stepson outside in freezing weather. That complicates things." Victor sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Complicates nothing. Discipline is my right as his guardian. Claire agrees, don't you, honey?" He yanked Claire closer, his fingers digging into her arm. She winced, but didn't answer. Her eyes darted from Ethan, wrapped in my quilt, trembling but resolute, to me, then back to Victor. "Ma'am," Patel pressed, "is it true your son was locked outside from around 11 a.m. until after 3? Claire's lips parted. The words seemed stuck in her throat, like she was drowning in them. Finally, she whispered, "Yes." Victor's head snapped toward her, his grip tightening. "What the hell are you saying?" She flinched. "It's the truth." The officers exchanged a look, their silence louder than any siren. "Enough of this charade," Victor barked. "You're making our family look ridiculous in front of strangers." Claire. Correct yourself right now. Or what? I snapped, stepping forward. You'll punish her the way you punish Ethan? Lock her out too? Hit her? Victor swung his glare at me, veins bulging in his neck. You don't know a damn thing about how I run my house.
And I don't need to, I growled, because I saw how you run it. The boy was freezing on your doorstep like a stray dog. That's all I need to know. Ethan tugged my sleeve. His voice was barely a whisper, but firm. Don't back down, Grandpa, please. I turned to the officers. You have enough to act, don't you? Child endangerment, abuse, call it what it is. Harris shifted, uncomfortable. Sir, it's not that simple. The boy is 17, technically a minor under Ohio law, but close to adulthood. If this becomes a custody matter— This isn't custody, I cut in. This is survival. Victor saw the hesitation, smelled the weakness like a wolf. He puffed his chest and jabbed a finger at me. There, you see? They're not arresting me. You've got nothing. But I do have something, a legal case. You broke my front door, stormed into my home, and stole a child that isn't even yours. The word stole hit like acid. Ethan flinched. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms. He's my grandson, my blood. That makes him mine in ways you'll never understand. Victor leaned forward until his face was inches from mine. His breath reeked of wine and arrogance. Then pray you don't live long enough to see what happens when you cross me. For a moment, I saw red, truly saw it. Every instinct screamed to break his jaw, to drop him into the snow where he belonged. But Ethan's grip on my sleeve kept me anchored. Not now, not yet. Patel's radio crackled. He stepped aside to answer, muttering into the mic. Harris folded his notepad and cleared his throat. Here's what we're going to do. Nobody's getting arrested tonight. Yet. Mr. Burke, he said, turning to me, Ethan can stay here with you temporarily. But this will go through Child Protective Services by tomorrow morning. They'll investigate. Victor exploded. What? You can't just hand him over? It's not your choice, Harris snapped back. We'll file the report. If what your wife said is true, this is already a case of neglect. Claire's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of 3 years had finally slipped an inch. She looked at me, then at Ethan. Her voice cracked. I should have stopped it. I should have. Victor whirled on her. You shut your mouth. Don't you dare betray me in front of these people. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. And then, something inside Claire snapped. Her chin lifted. Her eyes, wet with tears, finally hardened. No, Victor, I'm done. Silence. Even the snow seemed to pause in midair. You've humiliated me. You've hurt my son. You've poisoned this family. And I let you. But no more. Her voice shook but didn't break. If you think I'll keep covering for you, you're wrong. Victor's face twisted, a mask shattering in real time. He reached for her again, but Harris stepped between them. That's enough, sir. One more move and I'll cuff you right here. Victor froze, his chest heaving, eyes wild. Then, slowly, he stepped back, a predator retreating, but not beaten. Patel rejoined us, closing his radio. We'll make sure CPS visits first thing tomorrow. For tonight, Mr. Burke, keep Ethan here, safe. We'll check back. I nodded, though my blood still boiled. You do that, but know this, I won't wait for bureaucracy to save my grandson. If that man tries to set foot on my property, I'll deal with him myself. Victor smiled then, a cold, terrifying smile. Careful, old man. Revenge doesn't end the way you think. I met his stare without flinching. Maybe not. But tonight, it's just beginning. The days after the police left felt like walking through syrup. Slow, sticky, and dangerously uncertain. Ethan slept more than he talked. He sat at the kitchen table with a blanket around his shoulders and a stack of college brochures spread like a small, hopeful campfire. I called Ohio State's admissions office, made some calls about financial aid, and did the practical things that felt like armor against the rawness of what had happened. But Victor was not the kind of man to accept defeat in silence. He was the sort who dressed his cruelty as principle, and when that didn't work, he turned to weaponizing other people. His first move came the night after the officers left. I was dozing in my recliner when a slap on the passenger window made me jolt awake. Headlights cut into the living room, footsteps pounded. I peered through the curtains and saw a hulking figure holding a baseball bat. My chest tightened. Victor? No, someone else. Then the porch light flicked on. Claire stood in the doorway, face streaked with tears, pointing into the yard. A puddle of black radiator fluid smeared across my front walk. My truck, where Ethan had sat, safe and warm, had 4 shredded tires and a message scrawled across the hood in crude red spray paint. Thief. I called 911 and breathed shallow while officers took statements and photographed the damage. Vandalism, the patrolman said flatly. We'll log it. If you have any reason to suspect who did this, I didn't have to fill in the rest. We all knew. Victor's message arrived over the following days in different forms. A lawyer's demand letter accusing me of theft and property damage, ridiculous on its face. Anonymous posts on neighborhood boards alleging I'd terrorized the Simmons household. A voicemail left at midnight threatening legal action and worse if Ethan didn't come back. Someone anonymously reported me to the county for harboring a minor against parental rights. The tone was unmistakable. Make the defenders look like the criminals. It rattled the neighborhood. I'd been a fixture in this subdivision for 30 years, worked at the plant, coached Little League, shoveled snow for old Mrs. Delgado across the street. People who'd once waved from their porches now lowered their shades and avoided eye contact. Victor's charm had always been public, his cruelty private. He had friends on the country club circuit and on the school board, and he used them like armor. If he thought that noise would scare me into silence, he miscalculated. Revenge, I decided, would have to be worked like a job. Patient, methodical, relentless. It wouldn't be blind fury. It would be precise. It would be legal. It would be truth wrapped in iron. First, we hardened our position. Lieutenant Harris kept his promise and expedited the CPS visit. The social worker, a woman named Dana Cole, saw Ethan and had a private interview with him. She took notes, scheduled a follow-up, and put an emergency hold in place to keep Ethan safe while they investigated. She also advised me to document everything: photos, dates, times, witnesses. That was the seed of the plan: evidence. Second, Claire, finally awake, shaking but decisive, signed forms that allowed authorities access to school records and medical notes. She told HR at work she needed time off. She agreed to give a sworn statement outlining what she'd known and when. It was not a neat, noble thing. It was messy and full of guilt, but it was honest. She said the words out loud. He was my son's guardian. He did this. I was scared. I am sorry. Her confession was the crack that widened into a fissure. Third, we canvassed witnesses. There was Mrs. Delgado, who'd seen a scuffle outside the house 2 weeks earlier and had heard a boy crying late into the night. There was another neighbor, Marcus Riley, who walked his dog past the Simmons porch every morning and remembered seeing Ethan bundled in only a hoodie one freezing dawn. Marcus gave a signed statement, and crucially, a blurry video he'd taken on his phone of Ethan sitting on the steps that afternoon. The timestamp clear, the boy's posture unmistakable. I started a folder, physical, fat, and ugly, with police reports, dye-stained tires photos, Marcus's video, the CPS intake, and Claire's sworn statement. I included the voicemail transcripts and copies of the anonymous posts. Each piece by itself was a shard. Together, they formed a devastating mosaic. Victor didn't sit idle. He escalated. One evening, a package came for me. A thick envelope with a glossy business card inside belonging to a private investigator from Cleveland.
Victor's handwriting, or rather his arrogance, had included a note. "You'll need more than feelings, Burke." He wanted to hire the noise to smear us. But hiring a PI had a cost. It meant he had to acknowledge interest in the matter publicly when receipts were subpoenaed. We made sure the county clerk's office was aware of the timeline in which the PI's invoices might appear. Little things like that make big things possible later. The next move would be public and surgical. I arranged a meeting with Lieutenant Harris and Dana Cole, asked for their advice, and then asked for their blessing on a public move. They were cautious. No one wanted to weaponize the system. But Harris saw the pile of evidence on my kitchen table and nodded. "If this goes where it looks like it's going," he said quietly, "you'll want it to be airtight." Claire and I began to reclaim the narrative with care. We drafted a single, factual letter and delivered it hand to 3 places: the school principal, Ethan's counselor, and the local paper's community editor. Not a public smear, just a factual account, dates, times, who had seen what, and a request for help for a minor whose health had been endangered.
The counselor invited Ethan for an intake. The newspaper editor read our packet and set it aside with polite skepticism. But editors love facts tied to human interest. He promised to keep it on file. Victor sensed pressure and struck back with a different angle. He weaponized the law. His attorney filed for an interim injunction claiming I had no custodial rights and had removed Ethan without parental consent. The motion included photographs of my broken door, photos I'd reluctantly posted when filing the police report, and a list of alleged offenses. The courthouse scheduled a hearing. The night before the hearing, something small and brutal happened. My mailbox was smashed, letters scattered like discarded promises. I swept them up in the early light and found among them a glossy flyer for a charity golf outing featuring Victor as a guest speaker. I pinned it to the folder. He had a life outside our tiny domestic feud, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, being the respectable man of the neighborhood. That life was about to be exposed to the facts we'd been quietly compiling. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled of paper and stale coffee and too much waiting. Victor arrived with his attorney, pinafore of arrogance in place. I walked in with Ethan and Claire. No dramatics, just a small family and a fat folder of truth. Let Harris sat in the back and gave a small nod when our eyes met. In the courtroom, Victor's lawyer tried the usual: questions about jurisdiction, rhetoric about family autonomy, and a thinly veiled attempt to paint Ethan as a prodigal escaping a protective father figure. They called the late-night graffiti an act of vandalism unrelated to Victor's family, circumstantial. They argued the broken door was evidence of my criminality. Then I handed the judge the folder. Marcus Riley's video played in the judge's office, raw and terrible, the timestamp a quiet witness. Claire's sworn statement read aloud filled the air like a confession. Mrs. Delgado testified. CPS testified about their intake and concerns. Even the patrolman's notes about the vandalism and the timeline tied Victor's campaign to a pattern, not a random set of unfortunate events. By the end of the morning, the judge issued a temporary protective order. Victor had to stay away from Ethan and maintain distance from the Burke residence. He was prohibited from contacting witnesses, and law enforcement was instructed to monitor the situation. The injunction was not final, but it gave us breathing room. It was a break in the oncoming storm. Victor's face in the courtroom was the look of a man who'd been shown his reflection and found it monstrous. He left beneath the watchful eyes of the officers, and the high-powered lawyer escorted him out like a man being led from a stage set after a poor performance. We stepped out into the light, the November wind crisp and nearly holy. People on the courthouse steps glanced our way, some with curiosity, some with the relief of seeing a bully checked. Claire gripped Ethan's hand and did not let go. We had not yet finished what needed to be done, but the first careful cut had been made. Truth moves slowly sometimes, but when it lands hard. Victor was dangerous still. His next move would be unpredictable. But now he was playing on our field too, where evidence, law, and community could be turned toward him. And that was the beginning of a new kind of revenge, not the instant blind lashing of fury, but the steady work of exposing what had been hidden, one fact, one witness, one paper at a time. The protective order bought us temporary safety, but it also painted a target on our backs. Men like Victor don't retreat, they regroup. He had money, connections, and a public reputation he guarded like a crown jewel. Losing in court, even on a preliminary motion, threatened to crack that polished mask, and he wasn't about to let it slip without a fight. The first sign of retaliation came in whispers. At the grocery store, people who'd known me for decades suddenly hushed as I walked past. At church, one of the ushers leaned in and murmured, "Heard you're making trouble for Claire's new husband. Maybe best to let families sort their own business." Victor's narrative was spreading, overbearing old man, stirring drama, exaggerating teenage sulks into abuse. He was poisoning the well before the truth could sink in. Ethan noticed too. "Why are they looking at us like we're the villains?" he asked one night, staring out the window while snow feathered the glass. "Because Victor's scared," I told him. "Scared people lie loudest." But inside, I felt the weight. Reputation is currency in small towns, and Victor had been hoarding his for years. 1 week later, the high school principal called a meeting. Ethan's counselor was there along with a few staff. Victor hadn't been invited, but I could feel his fingerprints on the agenda. The principal cleared his throat, shuffling papers. "Mr. Burke, Mrs. Simmons," he caught himself, then looked at Claire. "Miss Carter. We've received concerns that Ethan's absences and disruptions at home may affect his graduation prospects." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Disruptions? You mean when I was locked outside for half the day?" Silence. The counselor, Mrs. Reeves, gave a small nod of support, but the principal shifted uncomfortably. "The school can't take sides in family disputes." Claire straightened, her voice steady. "This isn't a dispute. My son was abused. I enabled it by staying quiet. That stops now. If you can't acknowledge the truth, then at least don't call it a disruption." Her tone cut sharper than I'd ever heard from her. The principal blinked, reddened, and scribbled something on his pad. Mrs. Reeves caught Ethan's eye. "Your transcript is strong, Ethan. Don't let noise distract you. You'll graduate, and you'll go where you're meant to go." It wasn't victory, but it was resistance. One more brick laid in the wall against Victor's smear campaign. That weekend, flyers appeared in mailboxes across the subdivision. Glossy paper, expensive ink. At the top, "Stop the lies, protect our families." Below, bullet points twisted our story into grotesque parody. "Elderly man kidnaps teenager from loving home." False claims of abuse weaponized to destroy community trust. Courtroom theatrics wasting taxpayer resources. The flyer ended with Victor's smiling headshot beside his daughter, framed as the picture of wholesome stability. I found one shoved under my doormat. Ethan found another at the gas station bulletin board. My blood boiled, but I told him, "Paper burns, truth doesn't." Still, I knew what Victor was doing. He wasn't trying to convince everyone. He was trying to create doubt. Enough to muddy the waters when CPS or the courts made decisions. That night, Claire stood in my kitchen, holding the flyer with trembling hands. Her eyes burned, not with fear this time, but with something fiercer. "For 3 years, I let him control the story," she said. "In my house, in my marriage, even in my head. But he doesn't get to write it anymore." She looked at Ethan, then at me. "Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce, full custody petition too. I should have done it years ago." Ethan's breath caught. "Mom, are you sure?" Her lips curved into a small, pained smile. "For the first time in years, I'm sure." The next morning, we sat in the attorney's office, a plain place with beige walls and the faint smell of burnt coffee. Claire told her story from the beginning, voice breaking but steady. She signed papers with a trembling hand, but she signed them. Each signature was a crack in Victor's control. 2 days later, the local paper ran a short column buried on page 6. Protective order issued in domestic neglect case. No names, but details clear enough for anyone who cared to connect dots. The editor must have decided the story mattered after all. The shift was subtle but real. At the grocery store, Mrs. Delgado touched my arm. "I saw the boy that day," she whispered. "I'll testify if they need me." At church, one of the ushers pressed my hand and muttered, "We're with you." It wasn't everyone. Some still avoided us. But the silence was breaking. The night after the article, Ethan woke screaming. A brick had smashed through his bedroom window, scattering glass across the quilt. Attached was a note, scrawled in thick black marker. "Traitors burn." Claire called the police, her voice trembling but controlled. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, glass dusting his hair, his face pale. I swept the shards into a bucket, fury coiling tight in my chest. When the officers arrived, they took the brick, the note, the photos. They promised to investigate, but I knew how these things went. Unless someone caught Victor in the act, it would be written off as unverified. After they left, I sat across from Ethan and Claire. "This won't stop until we make it stop," I said. "The law moves slow. Victor doesn't. That means we can't just defend ourselves. We have to go on the offense." Ethan looked at me, eyes wide but resolute. "What do you mean, Grandpa?" I leaned forward, my voice low. "I mean, it's time Victor learns what it feels like to be the one afraid in his own house." For the first time since Helen's death, I felt something alive inside me. Not grief, not just anger. Purpose. Revenge had a name now.
Victor thought fear would silence us. Instead, it sharpened us. Every brick, every smear, every flyer made Claire stronger, Ethan braver, and me more determined. We didn't fight him with fists. We fought him with what abusers hate most: truth, spoken loudly. Claire began writing her story. With Dana Coles, the CPS worker, guidance, she submitted a formal affidavit describing years of abuse. The locked doors, the withheld meals, the bruises she'd pretended not to see. It was raw, full of shame, but it was real. Ethan worked with Mrs. Reeves, his counselor, to document incidents stretching back 2 years. His essays, written in the plain language of a 17-year-old, were heartbreaking in their simplicity. I thought being cold was normal. I thought being hungry was normal. I thought Mom couldn't help me. I thought maybe I deserved it. I gathered witnesses, neighbors, teachers, even Victor's co-workers at the supermarket, who quietly admitted he had a temper. I didn't beg them to testify. I just asked them to tell the truth. Then we went public. Not with gossip, not with flyers, but with facts. Claire gave an interview to the community editor, on record, with her name. The article ran on the front page this time. Local stepfather investigated for neglect and abuse, protective order issued. The headline cracked Victor's facade. The whispers flipped. At the grocery store, people stared at him. At church, his golf buddies whispered behind his back. For the first time, he wasn't the respected man of the cul-de-sac. He was the monster of Maplewood. And he hated it. Victor retaliated with noise, threats on voicemail, angry rants to anyone who'd listen. But the more he shouted, the more he revealed himself. When CPS came with a court order to inspect his house, they found what we already knew. Ethan's room was barely livable, cold and sparse, compared to the comfort given to Victor's biological daughter. It was discrimination, plain as day. The case moved fast. The protective order became permanent. Claire's divorce petition gained traction, with full custody recommendations leaning her way. Then came the trial. The courtroom was packed, neighbors, reporters, even curious strangers. Ethan took the stand. His voice shook at first, but then it grew steady. He told the judge about Thanksgiving Day, about the hours outside, about the basement and garage punishments. Claire testified next, tears streaming, but her voice never faltered. I was afraid. I let it happen, but I will not let it happen again. Victor raged. He called us liars, manipulators, conspirators. But his own arrogance betrayed him. He admitted to the punishments, insisting they were discipline. The courtroom gasped. The judge's face hardened. When the gavel fell, the verdict was clear. Custody stripped. Divorce granted. Probation and mandatory counseling for Victor, along with a restraining order. His job at the supermarket gone once the news broke. His reputation shattered. For a man who had built his life on control, losing it all was the sharpest blade of justice. He left the courthouse not in handcuffs, but in ruins. And sometimes, ruin is the truest revenge. The months after felt lighter. Not easy, healing never is, but lighter. Ethan finished high school with honors and received a scholarship to Ohio State, just like he dreamed. He spent weekends fishing with me, the lake quiet and forgiving. Sometimes, when he reeled in a fish, he'd grin like he used to as a boy, and I'd see the frost of Thanksgiving finally melting from his eyes. Claire rebuilt herself. She got a steady job at the library, rediscovered laughter, and even joined a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. She decorated her room in my house with bright colors Helen would have loved. As for me, I wasn't lonely anymore. My house, once hollow, was full of noise again. Guitar strums from Ethan's room, Claire humming in the kitchen, the sound of doors opening and closing without fear. One spring evening, Ethan stood on the back porch looking at the stars. "Grandpa," he said, "you saved me." I put a hand on his shoulder. "No, son, we saved each other." He smiled then, not the wary half-smile I'd grown used to, but something whole, something hopeful. And for the first time since Helen's death, I felt her voice in the wind again. Family sticks together. This time, I believed it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for tuning in.